Hello. Very good morning and welcome to Kuala Lumpur. It's really great to see everybody here making very, very long trips. So sorry, Kuala Lumpur is really far away. We think we're the center of the universe, but obviously not, right? But thanks so much for joining us today. And the great conference coming up tomorrow, the Global Investigative Journalism Conference. So thanks so much. We're going to get on the way. I'm just going to get my thing set up properly. We've got a great session ahead. So thank you so much, Dr. Andry, for the very interesting keynote earlier. We're going to get going for that. But quick introduction to our three distinguished speakers. We're talking about the shifting economic value of news. And we have, of course, Gina, Chua, I think very well known, has worn many, many hats. Currently the executive director of the Town Night Center at CUNY. That's right, okay. And that's recent, right? Is that kind of recent?
I think I'm 8 weeks old now.
Very recent. Congratulations. I hope you're enjoying it. And we have Churchill. Is it on Otieno? Thanks so much for filling the gap in our speakers, right? The Executive Director of the Eastern Africa Editor Society. Thanks for making the trip out here, and thanks so much for joining our panel today. And you've already met Dr. Andry, who has given a very interesting speech about the Indonesian proposal to WIPO. Let's kind of kick off, so the panel is really about, we all know that AI is changing the digital landscape, and AI is changing how people get the news, read the news, digest the news. And we have seen in the past 20 years, the Global South has pretty much lost out in the kind of digital competition. And we've seen a lot of revenues go to aggregators, to social media, etc. How can we learn from the past and kind of understand what we should do going forward? I think this is a great concern. I think it's been discussed in the last three panels. So we're kind of really trying to understand how do we capture the value of news in parallel, in at least comparable to the cost that it's costing us to create that news. I think all of us run significant newsrooms, and there are huge costs in terms of training and paying our journalists well. And how do we actually capture a fair share of that? I think that's the kind of the key issue. We're going to kick off with Dr. Andry. Your discussions, your proposal to WIPO is very interesting. But how do we get countries on board? How do we develop the kind of numbers that we need to get a proposal like this through?
Well, thank you so much. And good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so this proposal is actually, in terms of the substance, this is not the first ever proposal that been submitted to the WIPO. We noticed that our GRULAC friends already proposed the same thing in 2015. But then again, the advocacy from our GULAC friends is not that really put the echo bigger to the international fora. So what we did already is to map out to map who is going to be the promoters, who is going to be the positions, and which country that we can that can support our proposals. So from the mapping that we already done, we actually found some interesting things. First of all, WIPO consists of at least 10 group members. The first one is EU members. Secondly is Europe non-EU members. Third is North America. Fourth is GRULAC, Latin America. Fifth is East Asia. Sixth, South Asia. Seventh, South Asia and Oceania. Number 8 is Central Asia. Number 9 is Middle East. And number 10 is Africa. Now, from that groupings, we identified that most of the countries actually have similar voice with us. Let's say from EU members that assumably maybe they're not going to be interested with our proposal, but at least there are some members that has similar voice with us. At least 4 members in the EU has similar voice with us. Europe non-EU members, 2 countries. Now, North America, 2 countries. GRULAC, most of the substance I just presented to you today, most of it are quite similar with their proposal. And their members consist of 14 countries. East Asia, 5 countries. South Asia, 3 countries. And South Asia and Oceania is 12 countries, and so on. And then from those mapping, we identify 3 main proposals that I just explained earlier. Enhancing cross-border CMO's governance, alternative royalty distribution mechanisms, and establishing a global framework from administered WIPO. I understand that for these 3, the reaction will be quite varied. Okay, let's say enhancing cross-border CMO's governance most likely will have the high support because this is quite neutral, not going to change the laws, and it is the spirit of every countries. Now, more 50-50, alternative royalty distribution mechanisms. Mostly Global South will support this. But again, we're going to face the key industry actors, yes, including from those from the Global South. And, and also, lastly, proposal on establishing global framework administered by WIPO, this is going to be the most significant challenge that we're going to face. Because we're going to put the leverage from WIPO administering that so far they've been doing administrating conference and meetings, but now we propose they are the one who is going to be the global repertoire. Yep. So from that, we understand that the power, the supports, some of the countries already identified, but for the other member states that still probably going to have not really strong position. This is our now duty for us in the next ICCR meeting in WIPO to hold a bilateral meetings and all those things, and including our visit today in Kuala Lumpur, because I understand Ctrl+J consists of 3 countries of the organizing committee, and most of you are included in the map that we already mentioned earlier, and hopefully your government also will support us in the next SCCR meeting. So
Fantastic.
That's the short answer.
Fantastic. So looks like you think you may have the numbers, but there will obviously be some obstruction from industry players, right?
Correct.
Not just from the North, but even some from the Global South.
Yes.
Who are developing AI technology.
Correct.
So those who want to use the free content,
correct,
will kind of oppose it, right?
Just add more. Yeah. When the minister introduced the proposals, very interesting. The regional director of Spotify would like to see the minister. And he already done so. And he would like to have more explanation on how this proposal will go. And interestingly, after the meeting, Spotify wrote a letter to the minister to support Indonesia's positions in managing a fair and just royalty. And secondly, we also had been visited by the CISAC. CISAC is the Confederation of CMOs around the globe. And they're also interested to support Indonesia in proposing the proposal from Indonesia. Fantastic. At least we have a good start, and we will see how it goes in Geneva, and we'll see how the response from the other member states as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Doctor. We'll come back to you again.
Thank you.
Moving on to Gina. Gina, you've been in industry extremely long time.
Long, way too long.
So,
I'm older than I look.
but I think having this long view of media history also puts you in an interesting position, and you've also championed the further evolution of the media industry, right? Every step of the way. And yet, I think coming from Singapore, but also worked in Asia and the US, you would recognize that a lot of media in the South don't have the same leverage of, say, media in the North. And while there are ideas in terms of WIPO and things like that, what do you think? How should the media, the Global South, really respond? Is there avenue for, what is the bargaining power? How could they achieve something like this?
Okay, so first I will start by saying I'm just a humble journalist, not humble.
Not,
Just the
not just
journalist.
a humble journalist.
No, not humble, just the journalist. And so, so look, a lot of the policy stuff, like, whoop, over my head, and I understand, and I think, the work, I think the proposal Indonesia has put forward, the work that people are doing to, I don't know, extract money, reparations, whatever you want to call it. I don't honestly care. Money is money, it's fungible. And funnel money into the information industry, whether or not it's the news industry, it's information industry, I think that's critical, right? The needs have never been higher, the funding has never been shorter, and the public information space has never been more contested. So getting the money in is critical. Where I spend my time thinking about is, what do you do with the money? And that, I think, is just as critical question as if $10 billion dropped from the sky tomorrow, what would we do with it, I think is a question. And I think the core answer in my mind is that doing what we're currently doing, except 10 billion more of it, is not the right answer. You said it earlier that AI is changing everything. We are on the verge of a fundamental revolution in how information moves, is processed, and so on. And we can have our particular views about the morality of AI, the legal issues around AI, copyright, and so on. The fact is, people are going to use it whether we like it or not. It will transform how we create content, how we disseminate content, how people come to it. Most fundamentally, it will change how people come to content. And we as an industry, if we are to fulfill our public service mission, so we have to evolve to meet it. And so just really quickly, my fundamental assumption is that narrative changes. It changes to create much more personal information. If you've looked, large language models suck at facts, but they're very good at language. That's why they're language models, not fact models. And their ability to work around facts, which is why I don't believe in training, I believe in retrieval augmented generation systems, RAGs. Their ability to parse language, to go through information, create narratives at scale that are incredibly personalized to people is huge. And people will turn to those things. I think that presents both an opportunity and a problem. The problem is, of course, that we descend into very small filter bubbles. The opportunity, and I just want to sort of talk about this in terms both of the Global South and in terms of underserved and marginalized communities, is the ability to now create information that is tailored for societies and communities that never had information before. Our previous business model has been built around create one piece of content and get it to as many people as possible. Scale is the winner. That's why the Global South tends not to win. We're small markets. We don't get information. We can't compete against the big players. I think the future is small. I think the future is built around understanding communities really well, super serving them with information that they need, using AI tools. The value we have is in the asking of questions, the creation, the collection of facts, the creation of structured data. The narrative gets taken over by the machines, and the true value is understanding our communities. And I think news organizations, large and small, but especially in the Global South, well, small news organizations everywhere, need to adjust to that reality quickly. And I think there's a real opportunity for us. If we get the money, I'm counting on the minister to get the money, but then we can't squander it. We can't squander it doing what we've always done, because the world is changing under our feet and we have to adjust.
Thanks so much. I think that's really good insight. But what you're describing is actually not a typical media company, right? The media companies are generally staffed by editors and journalists, and they love to tell a story, right? They want to tell the world how they see the world, how they see the story.
Can I just do my incredibly unpopular statement here, which will get me chased from the stage? So every time I go up in a conference and I talk about this, right, and I say this is what needs to be done and we are going to give up a huge chunk of the power narrative. And to be clear, like, there will always be narrative. There will always be great 8,000-word articles. There will always be great commentary, always be great analysis. That serves a sliver of the population. But the vast majority of the population, it just wants to know, like, what's happening to my school? What happened to the fire down the street, right? I mean, like, they just want information, and that is a different pool of information. And we serve both, and we have to serve both. We can't spend all the time talking about which prize we won for which, 8,000-word thing. And so somebody always in the audience says, like, yeah, well, what about the journalist jobs? And my answer is, we are not here to save journalists. We're not here to save journalism.
Bad news, everybody.
We are here to save information in the public interest. That's our job. And that's what we are here to do. I've said to people, like, imagine this was a conference of doctors, and they were sitting around, and they were like, hey, we have this new technology. It improves public health outcomes, extends life expectancy. And then one of them says, but we don't need only half of us. You know how we would report on them? How we would talk about how the medical industry doesn't care about public health because they just want to keep their jobs? Yeah, well, that's how people will report on us. So we're not here to save journalists. We're here to save information in the public interest, to keep civic engagement and democracy. And if we believe in our mission, then by God, let's believe in our mission.
Oh, that's very interesting. I'll come back, but to summarize, what I'm hearing is that, yes, there is that role for the storyteller, that 8,000-word article that will serve, some folk, but the majority of folk, it's like, what you mentioned reminded me of Google, and Google wanted to organize the world's information, right? So, our media companies, organizing information in certain ways so that people can get their facts, their information in some ways, right? So it's kind of more data, structure, RAGs, AI, and but you also added understanding your audience, right? So to what extent are we investing in understanding our audiences and what their needs are? But that's very interesting, and we'll come back to it. Over to you, Churchill. Thanks so much for joining the panel in the last minute. As a public service and community, broadcasters struggle to remain viable, right? As a public sector, what are some practical steps or partnerships between governments and platforms that are needed to sustain public service content in Africa, in African language, or with vulnerable communities?
Thank you. I think an interesting question coming after Gina's.
Put you in a bit of a fix.
Absolutely. But also a very, very important one, because this session talks about value. I think the invitation I seem to hear from Gina is value for who? Is how we value news comparable to how audiences value news, for example, in the current times. And I think there's some asymmetry there. When I speak to journalists, when I speak to colleagues, their attitude to what they do and the value they create is hugely different from what the public seems to think. And I think that's where we must then drive this agenda from. That we must do what's necessary for those for whom we are creating, organizing this information, to see the value that we bring to the table. And for me, that is what then must, of necessity, drive whatever partnerships we seek to create. That value for me sees news as essentially part of a public infrastructure that helps society understand itself and drive itself. When we look at our platforms, when we look at the content that we and our newsrooms create, how much is that conversation part of that content? Today we are looking at, and the previous sessions of Ctrl+J, we've looked at the challenges and how we might overcome those challenges. But how can we then take that conversation into the public domain to then invite and create the bridges that we need to connect with, for example, community newsrooms or community broadcasters in Africa, for example. For the most part, a lot of these usually are defined, for example, in English, if I may say so. But in Africa, when you think about it, less than 20% of Africans speak English. And I think that will be true for the larger universe of the global south. Yep. So how do we make sure that the partnerships we create then also brings in the languages of the audiences that we must serve? Sometimes that means that we must connect with community organizations. Sometimes it means that we must connect with civil society organizations. Sometimes it means that we must connect with the policymakers and the governments that then create the conditions and the infrastructure that we must live within. The second piece for me is how do we then bring the community information organizers, be it the reader journalists in a village, or be it the news influencer today, that a big chunk of his or her community looks up to for him to interpret or define what the world is like into this conversation. Because it's only through that connection that we get to cascade the values that journalism exists for into those places. They begin to see, that truth, as it were, is not something that each of us should have our own versions of. That for us to progress as a humanity, that there has to be a certain amount of shared truth that we all then subscribe to. Finally, it's a question of what devices, what techniques, what skills do journalists then have to deliver on that huge mandate in the current world, given the huge contestation around truth, as it were, driven by the global north, as we know, the disruption around the whole essence of humanity as we know it. How many of our newsrooms are able to interpret that for our local audiences, and how might we help them drive that? And I think that's another level of partnership that we should create. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think picking up on some of your points, you mentioned the role of influencers and others, right? So I think that alludes to the fact that, as a public sector media participant, it's perhaps not about, where you're earning the money. It could be, taxpayer-driven or community-driven. But there is a danger that the citizens are no longer, visiting or reading public sector information. So that then makes it more difficult for public sector organizations to reach out to the public. And you mentioned you might have to go through or reach them through influencers, right? So how do you then make sure that you have that economic value? Because even governments will say that, if you have a public sector media that's not being consumed by the public sector, then what value is that? So talking about, the shifting, economic value of news, is that a challenge for public sectors to actually justify why they should exist?
If that question was a question being confronted in a separate sector, say the financial sector, for example, there will be tons and tons of news space that we give to it. There'll be lots of discussions, acres of newspaper articles addressing that same issue. But today we don't see that. If you pick any newspaper in any of our continents, you hardly see the question that you're raising addressed in those issues. And because of that, we tend to leave that public behind. They don't see the value that we bring to the table as a critical part of their lives. So when it comes back to policy making, when it comes back to revenue allocation in the public domain, we then don't get the kind of priority that we should. So there is a sense in which, using perhaps a media literacy lens, we need to bring up to speed our audiences, but also our policymakers, so that when we arrive to questions such as tax policies on essential inputs into news production, then we can have a conversation that every stakeholder understands where we're coming from.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be tricky, right? Especially going forward. Gina, you want to react to some?
Yeah, just a really quick point, right? And I think sort of the question about how do you value public sector media if it's not being, quote, consumed? I think part of this is that we have to change what our definition of consumption is. It's the dissemination of information to people who want it, and to the extent that the information gets to people That's what really matters. Really quick pop quiz. Some of you know the answer. How many murders were there in Washington, D.C. last year? You know the answer, but I'll tell you what it is, because it's 190. How many of them does the Washington Post cover? How many of them does NPR cover? It's a tiny fraction. 15 years ago, a husband and wife team, 1.5 people, because Chris had a job, Laura was full-time, decided they would cover every one of them. That is the difference. Like back then, they didn't have the technology. They went out and they put a spreadsheet and they covered every murder. And so, you know, back then there was 150 murders in New York, in DC every year, and the Washington Post maybe covered, I don't know, 20 or 30 of them. So there left like 120 families whose stories were not told. Nobody cared that their people had died. They collect the database. The Washington Post does not do this. NPR does not do this. If you think of public sector information as like, let's collect all that, and then let's find a way, because now we have narrative machines that create that narrative for people, and allow those 130 families who are not served to be served. What's the definition of consumption is really the question. The point is they're better off. How do we find a way to measure that value, and then ideally, you know, give them the resources to be able to do that.
So are you saying that public sector, like just how you said, media companies need to change and gather data and structure data information? Should public sector as well go in that direction to become more conscious about how you gather data and how you serve communities using AI? Or are public sector media continue going to be, you know, broadsheets or broadcast channels? Churchill?
I don't think there's a choice there. Yeah, the universe has changed. The person consuming this information and how they consume it has changed fairly significantly. Probably, if humanity was defined, or humanness was defined by how we consume information, then probably we are talking to a different kind of animal as compared to what we used to address before. So definitely, we must change, whether it's public, in the public sector or even in the private sector. Otherwise, we stop to exist or stop to matter.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Dr. Andry, you know, listening to Gina and Churchill, right? What do you think? Do you think that, you know, organizations are going to change, or are they going to sit back and hope to get, you know, benefits from WIPO?
Well, I think the key is all organization has to be adaptive. We cannot be resistant to change. We have to adapt to the changes internally and globally. And maybe I just would like to explain from the angle of, again, my subject today is more on the royalty. The point is, when we talk about royalty for the fairer and just royalty for the creator, is actually only part of it. But we're talking about the value. When we're talking about the public value, who are the people, or who are the components in the society that will benefit from the fair and just royalty? This is not about the creator. In fact, industry also should be benefit from it. When the CMOs have more professionals work on the job, when the creators get the fairer treatments on their remunerations of the creation that they made, when the songs and when the journalists make their or perform their creations, all these ecosystems will play a better value in the society. So I think this is about the balance. Now, Jakarta Protocol or the Indonesian Protocol is actually going to strike the imbalance of that value. So I think changes is imminent, and we have to be adaptive. I agree that media is not only about how to get the money, but I understand also that to run a better organizations, you have a better management, including the budget management as well, to get your journalists more professionals, to get your technology systems more adaptive to the society. And of course, we have to educate people on how to understand better in this world, the world paradigm that had been shifted very much so. So I think The homework is not only about to say that we have to stay status quo, but we have to change. But the key is how to balance. Well, the role of government is how to put those who are in need to be balanced because of the situation that is not profited to that segment. Is the job of the government to put it back to the in a more stable ecosystem. So that's just my response. Thank you.
Precisely. Okay, we're going to open up. We've got about 20 more minutes, and we're going to open up for questions in a couple of minutes, so get your questions ready. But before I go to the public for questions, I want to ask Gina, you've talked about a very different type of media organization. Can you give us an example? Have you seen any organization already changing in that direction that people can kind of refer to?
I mean, I wish I could say I have. I mean, I think there are organizations that are pivoting to that very high end. And again, Semaphore, where I still have a part-time job, is very much that kind of organization. That's great. And I think, there are organizations that really kind of speak to the top end of things. I don't just mean organizations, like Substackers, creators, people who have, can pull together big audiences. I think they all exist in that world, and I think they all will do well. I just don't believe that those are high-end chefs in a world that is dying of hunger, and that's great. But now, how are other people doing? I think one of the issues that I look at is that legacy organizations have difficulty changing because of culture, because of resources, and an injection of money would help them if they will take it. I think we have to look at startups. I think we have to look at people who have fresh, no legacy costs, no legacy infrastructure, and think about how they can redo. So the short answer is no, I haven't seen a ton of it yet. I think they've seen some experiments. I think the technology is in fact still in its infancy. And I think there's some real questions about its stability. It's very hard to build an organization on something whose capabilities change essentially every 2 weeks, which is a bit of a problem. And then frankly, and I think one of the bigger problems we have to deal with, leaving aside all the other moral and ethical issues around using AI, is just capture by really large companies. And while I love playing with the tools, I'm not sure I want to build an entire organization based off, grok, let's say, and an owner who could decide to turn it off tomorrow. And I think those are critical questions, and I think those are the issues that, leaving aside sort of equitability and so on, is that I think we need more models. And I think the Global South should be building more models. They should certainly be building more local language models. But mostly they need to build models that are more distributed and whose ownership or whose at least control mechanisms are more broadly distributed and less subject to the whim of any individual.
Definitely. Great. Okay, so I'm going to open up, especially with those who have got questions and those who have opposing views. Who of you want to argue with these guys on stage, man? Come on, give them a hard time. Don't get them away with, let them this. Anybody? It's bright lights. I can't quite see the hands. Yes, I've got some hands at the back. Let's start with the ones at the back. There are two, I think, is that Mira, right? Yeah, Mira, please go ahead. And there's a lady just behind there as well later on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Prem, and thank you all. I'll be sitting down because I took some notes and have very specific questions, especially for
just a quick one-line introduction, perhaps.
Oh, Mir Milosevic, Executive Director of Global Forum for Media Development. Dr. Andy has mentioned a lot of things that I'm really keen to discuss in detail, but I'll just use this opportunity to ask him about what this community can do to support those processes. So first, on the language of the proposals at WIPO, what are the parts of different proposals that are relevant for journalism, and is there anything that we can input into? So the second one is, you were talking about WIPO changing its kind of jurisdiction to implement this mechanism in the future. Are there any processes that need to happen at the level of WIPO at the UN, such as WSIS process recommending this or anything else that, again, the community can support? The third one was around identifiers and standard setting bodies. There are processes with the standard setting bodies at the International Engineering Task Force at the moment that it is defining the standards for the crawlers to be able to access different types of content. Do you engage with that? And is there anything, again, that the community can do to better engage with those processes? So a lot of questions, but basically, what can this community do to be better represented at the key decision-making elements where the value creation will be identified and standardized? Thank you.
Wow, very tough questions, but we'll come back. Let's take one or two more questions as well. The lady just behind, just quick one-line introduction, and then your question. You can get the mic there.
Okay, I'm not the lady, but anyway,
Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Jan Lublinsky. I work for DW Academy. I also have a technical question, but I wanted to make a general remark. Thank you for organizing and running this. I feel part of the family, even though I've not been involved. And I must say this is quite an extraordinary, impulse and strong movement from the Global South. And as some of you know, we at DW Academy will try to pick up with a project that's called The Next Chapter. And we are currently running regional consultations next week in Chiang Mai, also in Mexico City, with our partners there, also in Jordan and in Moldova, to bring it all to Berlin on the 28th of January. So with the Next Chapter project, we will humbly try to build on what you have put together, but we will hope that there'll be many other next chapters after this from different perspectives and keeping this conversation going. And I think we need to push on the technical aspects, just as Mira has asked. I have another question to Dr. Andry, actually. I admire how strategic you are about looking at the stakeholders involved, the different country representatives, and who can be turned into favor of what you're advancing. My technical question to you is, how do you answer to these arguments that come from big tech towards avoiding regulation, avoiding all copyright law? Because as you know, the lobbying efforts are really hard. And my question is, what is your narrative, not against it, but rather in favor of yours to convince political actors in this space? Thank you.
Thanks. So no more questions for Dr. Andry. I think he's already overloaded. Yes, last question from that side of the table. Yeah. At the back. Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Caroline Wiemer. I'm working for Fondation Hirondelle. We are a Swiss development media organization. My question is really on the economic value of news. And I'm asking the panelists, how do you see maybe looking at health or education, which are value for democracy, for society, and how they measure that value, so we can maybe learn some lessons and make coalitions with these sectors to not only talk about money, but non-tangible value for societies and people. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, yes, Trina is pointing out someone at the back. Yes. Thank you, Trina.
Yeah, my name is Tijan C. I'm a journalist. Maybe that should be enough. I run a journalism school, so if I listen to, is it Gina? I hardly agree. I think you even get applauded rather than being kicked out. So it means there was some truth that you were probably saying. However, the issue for me is, how do we balance the need to adapt to the new trends and the need to have public interest news? Because it's rather easy to adapt. Say, okay, what do the people need? Look at what's happening on TikTok, for instance. Short videos, a lot of, most of it, sorry for the word, is probably crap. And everybody's running for it. It takes a lot of time, easy to consume, but what impact on the next generation? What about the key issues in countries that need to build, in countries that need progress? What do you do with knowledge? I think these are the critical issues when you're talking about the value of news. It's not just what do the people want to consume. I mean, people want to consume entertainment and news and a lot of other things. But how do we make our job relevant while adapting? I think that's the issue. How do we find the balance?
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just looking around here. We take one last question. Yes, is that Dashni? Yes, go for it.
Good morning. I'm Darshini. I guess I can describe myself as journalist and mediapreneur. My question on the economic value of news, it's mainly directed at Churchill and Gina, but anyone else who can contribute, I'd like that. So I've run a small media enterprise myself for many years, a few years. And when we talk, I find that when we always talk about the economic value of news, it's very linear, like currency, the value of currency. But that's not the case. So when we address economic value of news, the economic value placed by funders and the public who consumes the news are two very different things. And that's where the dissonance comes from and the problem of media businesses to stay sustainable. Because at least in this part of the world, the public they value news, but they don't value paying for news. And then that creates a problem because funders want to see a return of profit. So their idea of economic value for news is very different. And that puts a lot of small businesses under a pressure to scale, and that breaks them. So how do we talk a lot about media businesses trying to be sustainable and fundraising, but is there a way that we can talk to funders to change the way they value news and choose how they fund media businesses? I'd be very interested to know. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I think we're running out of time, so we'll come back to the panel now. Andre, you had a lot of questions, but we don't have that much of time, so maybe just your top-line answers to some of those questions.
Okay, I tried to wrap all the three questions together. First of all, in regard to the committee, how the committee can support the proposals and how it relates to the UN and all these technical support questions. So first, I think in terms of the support from the community, of course, this is going to be significant support if all the journalist sectors can support the proposals. Why? As I said, in terms of the components from the journalist works, it contains a number of elements that have been regulated under international conventions. Text, images, audiovisuals. Those three are regulated under international conventions. And yet, while it has been regulated, but still the imbalances between the North and South are still exist. Now, how to put it together to make a more fair and just remunerations is, of course, we need the support from our friends, from journalists, to get a fairer remunerations. In Indonesia, for example, we don't have the same system or mechanisms to get the remuneration from the journalistic works compared to the music. But then if I can understand, maybe Pak Wahyu can correct me if I'm wrong, but again, they feel that the compensation get from the platforms are very low. Yes, that's the first issue. Secondly, AI platforms or the digital platforms do not even at all pay the remunerations for the journalistic works that have been used. So though all those two things are identified as the common issues that faced together by the musicians and other artists. And this proposal from the Jakarta Protocol, this is what we're going to bring together. And why we're not going to use journalistic as a narrative in the WIPO? Now, I want to be honest. In 1967, there is a long debate. There was a start debate in the WIPO on how they're going to regulate journalistic works under international conventions. I'm afraid to say that it may not be possible using the narrative or journalistic because of the sensitive issues to use journalistic, because we have different paradigms in seeing journalist works from across the globe. So I think the more neutral way to do it is to see which journalistic works that will suit into the international conventions. As I said, text, images, audiovisuals are part of the journalistic works. So why we have to say specifically journalism in the WIPO works. So this is the thing that I think we need the support from our friends from journalists to support the proposals. When the platforms, either AI-based or DSP, digital service platforms, support our proposals, at least for those who get low remunerations, they can get higher. Or secondly, the one who has not do at all to pay the remuneration for the journalistic works, they can do their responsibility based on the existing law that applies. And so, I'm sorry, just a technical questions, and I might relate it to the other questions about the more technical structure. We would like to encourage our friends from journalistic sectors to build consensus on how journalistic works will be paid for their works formally for global standardized mechanisms. For music, they already have SCMOs.
Yep.
But for media, I have not seen yet the standardized payment system. And we encourage our friends from the journalistic works. And we stand ready to work together, at least with Pak Wahyu, to push how journalists can make their own formal remuneration mechanisms to create a fair and transparent system.
Fantastic.
So that's it.
Thank you. Churchill, over to you.
There was a question about the conflicting understanding or appreciation of news between donors and audiences.
Yes.
And I think it's a really tricky one because one, in the news ecosystem, every stakeholder seems to have an interest, including that donor. And sometimes when you go with the donor's attitude to what news value is, you lose your audiences. In fact, the more they know that a newsroom is hell-bent on just delivering on what the donor wants, the more they trust that outlet a lot less. But the reality also is different contexts. This problem manifests in different contexts differently. So perhaps the question we should really be addressing is how might we co-create an understanding of that value in whatever space we're operating in. And whichever way we do that, I think the audience's understanding of news value should be the primary bit that contributes to that.
Audience values. Okay.
I see the flashing times up
flashing
thing, so I will
us.
be as quick as possible, and I will bring.
Make sure
home.
you had the last word.
I will bring us home. Anyway, so just to the question. So first thing I would just say is, actually influencers have huge audiences. So in fact, I mean, whether the content's good or bad, they reach people. So it's an interesting way to reach people. We should think about reaching people. But I think sort of one of the core issues, at least that old-time journalists like me have, is the idea that we do good work and you should value us because we do good work. And the truth is, latest survey I saw, 7% of people turn to chatbots for news, despite all of the problems they have. And under 25-year-olds, 15%. 36% turn to Facebook, 30% turn to YouTube. We've lost the battle. They are not reading 8,000-word pieces. The only people reading 8,000-word pieces are people like me on journalism prides committees, because we have to. So, I mean, it's not entirely true. But the point is, we have to kind of rethink what we're doing. We are losing audiences. We have to get to where they are. Whether that's through influencers, whether that's through AI narratives, whether that's through personalized information, we have to sort of think about what it is that we are doing and why we're doing it if we want to fulfill our mission. The other thing that I just want to say on the question of difference in value, right? And just for the record, I've spent my entire career in for-profit media, but I sit on the board of nonprofit media and nonprofit funders, including IFPIM. All money is dirty. All money is corrosive. All money has interests. All money wants you to do certain things. The goal is to diversify your stream so you are never beholden to one person. But more importantly, who are you serving? I don't have an answer for how, in this new world, we make money. What I do believe is that this is a world where we can take advantage of this fact to get closer to the people that we serve, the people we say we serve. And if we can get close to them, they are our, bad word, customers. We need to have that tie. Once we have that tie, then let's start talking about figuring out how we value that and how we extract value from it, how we fund it, how we pay for it, and spend less time thinking about how we can get funders to give us money.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so on that note, let's serve our customers better. So thank you so much to our three distinguished panelists. That was the shifting economic values of news. So back to the organizers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for our panelists as they exit the stage.